Okay, Pops.
Yes.
I want to go to Finance 101 today. There's a concept called loan-to-value ratio.
Yes.
Right? And one of the things that you taught me very early on when we started making videos for YAA is that you can actually finance more than what a vehicle's worth.
Well, some people can.
Some people can.
Yes.
Here's what I wanted to do today. I
Yes.
kind of want to tee you up, and I want to hear your explanation and help us all kind of get a level up here in terms of if we're going to finance the purchase of a vehicle,
Yes.
what is loan-to-value ratio? How much can I finance? And what's going on in the market right now with vehicle prices that are just through the roof?
Okay. Well, loan to value, if it's a new car, loan to value would be 100% of the value would be the MSRP. So if, let's just say a car has an MSRP of $30,000, the break-even point for the bank to finance just 100% of the value would be to finance $30,000. Now, depending on people's credit, banks will finance 75, 80, 85, 90, 95% of that 30,000 if you have edgy credit or edgier credit or moderate credit. If you have good credit, they'll finance 100%. In the old days, they used to finance, if you had really good credit, up to 135, 140%. So if, for instance, it was a car that had an MSRP of $30,000, you could finance $42,000 if you had really good credit at 140% of MSRP, which meant you could finance your tax, your license, any negative equity you might have had from your trade-in, and they would allow you to finance 40% more than what the real value of the vehicle was, which in reality was really closer to 60% more than what the real value of the vehicle was, because the moment you drove it off the lot in the old days, it depreciated 20%. Now, because of what's going on with the additional dealer markups, market adjustments, inventory shortage adjustments, banks are willing to finance up to 150%. So that $30,000 car, if you have really good credit, they'll let you finance $45,000 on that car.
Yeah.
Okay, which means that the bank instantly is about, 70%.
Yeah.
Over what its real value is the minute you drive off the lot.
So is the craziest loan-to-value you've ever seen around 150%?
Yeah, a finance manager would talk to a buyer at one of the lending institutions and call in a favor and, say, hey, I know the guy's credit's not exactly what you would want it to be for this type of loan, but he's always paid, and he makes a lot of money, and and even if he's late, he always pays his late payments, so he's actually making you extra money, and so the most amazing thing that I ever saw in the car business was when a finance person would call, submit a loan for a customer, and the bank would say no. And the bank would say, no, we need this, or this down. And then the finance manager would go back and forth with the buyer at the bank 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And ultimately, the buyer at the bank would end up just approving the loan as it was originally called in. And I never understood why they made everybody jump through the hoops so that they could get to the point where, it all started.
Yeah.
So today, they're willing to take an even greater risk than they were in the past, and especially on pre-owned cars, because
you said like 100% on a new car is easy. It's the MSRP. What's 100% on a used car?
Retail book. So whatever Black Book might say, they might take an average of Black Book and Kelley Blue Book and NADA to come up with what the average retail price should be. And then once again, they, if it was a $30,000 used car, they might be willing to finance $42,000 or $45,000 on that car, which is insane, because just a year ago that $30,000 used car might have been a $20,000 used car.
yeah. So first off, its retail price is inflated.
Yes.
Then because of the fact that people just got to get approved for loans. I don't want to call it a bubble, but because people got to get approved for loans, we're getting edgier and edgier on LTV values.
Yes.
And then we're lending above that. It's craziness. Does every financial institution play by the same rules? I guess my question here is, are there more conservative lenders
Yes,
and more
of course.
aggressive lenders?
It's like anything.
Because I kind of think, I'd imagine,
Yeah.
and you've said this before in the past, like those that can afford the least
Pay the most.
I'm imagining maybe on like some of the subprime side. I know you said like usually you can only get like 75 or 80%,
Yeah.
but I imagine there's also some lenders out there that probably do like 150% on subprime.
that are willing to, because the return could be so big. Because they get to charge
20% APR on it.
They get to charge exorbitant rates that they can look at their default ratios and go, even if we have 5% of our loan portfolio in default, because we're making 20% on the money we're lending, we can effectively afford to have 5% of all those total loans not being paid as agreed.
Yeah.
So yes, there are some banks that have much more conservative lending practices than others.
Yeah.
And then there's other banks that just, it appears that everybody's asleep at the wheel and nobody's paying attention at all.
Is there any way to know, I guess, like the proxy to what your potential LTV could be would be knowing your credit score, your credit range?
Well, the higher your credit score, the better off you're going to be when you're trying to arrange a car loan.
Yeah.
And here's the real sad reality. As I've always said, those that can afford to pay the least pay the most, and those that can afford to pay the most pay the least. So that people with good credit that can get 150% loan to value and really should know better than to do something like that.
Yeah.
But they can because they've always shown this propensity to pay. Whereas those who need the most help in order to be able to afford the transportation in today's market are the ones that have to pay the highest percentage rates,
interest rates,
okay, to get a loan, and are typically required to put more money down that they don't have than those who do have money to put down.
Yeah.
So it's really a conundrum, but it's all based on loan to value ratios and debt to income ratios. The consumer's amount of debt that they have based on the amount of income that they have.
We'll save that for another video.
Yes.
Thanks for doing a deep dive on LTV, loan to value. I think it's super important. And also, if you're out there and you've heard of, or maybe you've financed a vehicle recently, let us know. Like,
Yes.
Were you able to get above 150%? I'm very curious if in this market I'm super curious.
Yeah, I'm sure there are the occasional examples.
I'll post back on the community forum. I'll ask there actually because I'm. I imagine at more conservative financial institutions, they're sticking to like maybe a little bit above what their normal threshold would have been, and then I bet you at some predatory places, it's like screw it, 200%. Let's roll. It's like gambling. Let's roll
rolling
the dice.
And they're hoping it all doesn't fall apart at the same time. That's what they're hoping.
Does this sound like a time in your life that you remember, potentially?
Yeah, no, there's been, I mean, think back to 2008 when we had the financial collapse and the housing bubble collapse, and because people were, the old saying was, hey, if you can fog a mirror, we can get you approved. So you'd put a mirror under somebody's nose, and if you fogged it, you're approved. And that's the way home loans were being approved back in 06, 07, 08, before, everything kind of fell apart because they couldn't afford to pay for it. And the same thing will happen here. And then I guess naturally the government will step in and bail everybody out again because what the hell, we can just keep printing money.
And on that note, we'll end there. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you, honey.